first speaker will be Sampriti Ganguli, who's the Managing Director of the Corporate Executive Board's Government Practice. She's been with CEB for 8 years, working across corporate treasury, taxation, and audit matters, and has authored 25 major publications. Before she joined the Corporate Executive Board, Sampriti worked at JP Morgan, in the Corporate Mergers and Acquisitions Group at MCI WorldCom, and in the East Asia Division of the World Bank. Sampriti holds an MBA in International Finance from the Wharton School of Business and a Master's in International Economics from the Johns Hopkins University. Our next speaker will be Adrian Stanton, who I'm very glad was able to join us. Mr. Stanton had a meeting this morning, but he made it in time. We're really, really pleased he's here. He is the Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer at the Virginia Hospital Center and is responsible for developing and implementing the hospital's marketing and communication strategies. In this role, Adrian guides the hospital's efforts as a community-focused organization, delivering innovative care and improving the overall health of the community, our community. Prior to joining Virginia Hospital Center, Mr. Stanton had over 25 years of healthcare experience in the metropolitan Washington region. He holds a Bachelor of Business Administration degree from James Madison University. And our third speaker is Chris Zimmerman, our county board member, who's been a resident of Arlington since 1979. He was first elected to the board in 1996. He's served as vice chairman and chairman numerous times. He's a big advocate of transit-oriented development and managed growth and a proponent of new urbanism. And he has devoted much of his effort to ensuring the availability of affordable housing in the county. And I've worked with him on many issues, so I can personally testify to that. Regionally, he has worked to promote the concept of smart growth in the Washington area. He's represented our county on many regional transportation bodies. In 2004, Chris was the first recipient of the Livable Communities Leadership Award from the Washington Regional Network for Livable Communities. Chris has a Master of Arts in Economics from the University of Maryland and a Bachelor of Science in Political Science and Economics from the American University, and he is a resident of the Douglas Park neighborhood. I've asked each of the speakers to speak about 5 minutes, and then we hope to have more audience interaction. So, Sampriti, please.
Thank you very much, Marian. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Just a little bit of background about CEB, if you all are unfamiliar with our organization. We actually happen to be right around the corner at the Waterview Conference Center. We are an $800 million information services and advisory services firm with about 3,600 employees, roughly a third of whom are located here in our Rosslyn office. And back in about 2001, 2002, CEB was spread out across 5 different downtown locations in Washington, D.C., and we wanted to consolidate our operations into one area to help promote sort of camaraderie among our workplace employees. And there literally was not a single place in the District of Columbia that we could find that was affordable enough for our organization to consolidate. And so working with the Business Improvement District here in Rosslyn, we were able to isolate this particular location, and we moved in 2007. As we went through the process of trying to analyze where we wanted to house our headquarters, we actually, as a research firm, as you might imagine, looked at a lot of different research. And a couple of things really stood out to us. The first, and as has been mentioned by panelists before, was where our staff lived, but more importantly, how they got to work. And we really zeroed in on the orange line as being the most important pivot point in terms of deciding where to locate our operations, because the majority of our workforce actually commuted in via the orange line. The second was we surveyed our staff around amenities that were important to them, both in terms of what they wanted to do before the workday began and actually what they wanted to do after the workday. We have a very young work population. The average age at CEB is actually 30. And so our staff wanted, unsurprisingly, to have restaurants and access to all kinds of events after work, but they also wanted close proximity to the district. And for all of those reasons, Rosslyn became a very obvious choice for us and has been a great place for our employees. We monitor and track their satisfaction levels with both our facility as well as our location, and it's actually very high. One of the major concerns that do come up for us has to do with affordable housing. So at an average age of 30, one of the biggest concerns that most of our staff have is the ability to find affordable housing in the area, and what we are finding year after year is they are having to either commute in much from further areas. Many of them just out of school are actually choosing to live with family, with their parents, which is not necessarily the sort of epitome of the American dream for the young worker. Moreover, and more importantly, what we are finding is the number of people who are either asking for telecommute options or, as mentioned before by Lisa, who are choosing to leave the area as they advance in their career to go back to more affordable areas is actually quite significant. We as a company do have a policy to allow for telecommuting, and we try to do everything possible to allow workers to telecommute. But there's a couple of challenges with telecommuting. One, as you mentioned, as Lisa mentioned earlier, the infrastructure really is not available for us to do the type of telecommuting we would like to do, namely telepresence and the ability to video conference in multiple areas. It just takes a tremendous amount of bandwidth to be able to do that. Secondly, and maybe more importantly, is when you have a management structure or groups of teams working together, any one person telecommuting puts a little bit more of a pressure on anybody else that actually remains, and so the perception of distribution of equal work changes. And then finally, and most importantly, this is not true in our organization per se, but it is true more broadly, specifically with the federal government. The perception around telecommuting as being equivalent to people that are essentially not working is quite high. And so there needs to be a fundamental cultural, if you will, shift in terms of the perception of what people are doing when they telecommute. Again, not a challenge within our own organization, but a challenge with the clients that with whom we actually work. So essentially, as an organization, while we are excited to be in Rosslyn, while we will continue to have a presence here, we do express a significant amount of concern about the lack of affordable housing for our young employees. We would like them to stay in the region. We would like to see them advance in their careers here. We would like them to sort of establish roots in the community, in the area. As we look for people who go from a single-family structure to multifamily, the lack of available childcare options, in addition to the lack of affordable family units, also come up significantly in terms of what we hear from our employee base. So as an organization, we certainly would be advocates and would like to support the community in terms of helping to see more advances in those areas. Again, I'm open for any questions at the end of the panel if you should have any.
Good morning. I'm Adrian Stanton, one of the vice presidents at Virginia Hospital Center. We have about 2,300 employees at our hospital. We've been in the community for 65 plus years. We do not have some of the similarities that Sam talked about. For example, we're not going anywhere. We don't have a huge option as far as telecommuting. Everybody's got to be at the facility. We've got an interesting workforce because we go, in those 2,300, we go everywhere from physicians to nurses to ancillary support individuals, so we kind of cover the gambit of both populations as well as pay grades. Just to give you some perspective of where our employees come from, well, let me step back. Our service for hospitalization, about 75% of our patient population comes from the Arlington and surrounding areas. And by that I mean, if you kind of took a marker and penciled in the beltway from river to river, that extended area. So that includes areas outside of Arlington, but that's where 75% of our patients come from. Our employees, on the other hand, 82% live in Virginia, 12% live in Maryland, and then we actually have some people who are in the district as well as West Virginia. Looking into Virginia, we only have about 19% that live in Arlington. The bulk of them live in Fairfax, and then there's quite a few that live in what I'd call west of Fairfax or south of the Woodbridge area. So folks come from a long way. Why that's important is those individuals, those workers for our hospital, in many cases are traveling by at least one hospital, if not two hospitals, as they come to our facility. The reality is there's not a huge difference in our pay. So our problem is our workers on a daily basis, depending upon how long that commute is, might be going by two other facilities on their way to our facility, and at some point probably questioning in the midst of sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic, why am I doing this? We have tried to institute some things to help with that. We have done a program with the ART bus system where we subsidize the travel, so an employee, all they have to do is show their name badge if they come in on Metro or any other mechanism to get to the bus route, and then they get free transport to the hospital. We're fortunate to have an ART bus line that goes right to the hospital. We also have done a child care facility for our staff, but it's also open to the community as well, in hopes that that helps with some of the younger population who may have children and are struggling with how to do work as well as raise a child. Just to give you some perspective on our workforce accounts for almost 60% of our expenses. And then if you delve into our workforce, the largest being the nursing population, the average age of our nurses last year was around 45 years old. So that's a little bit of and it is actually getting older as years pass by. So that's a little bit of what we're struggling with. Obviously, when we talk about our employees and what our opportunities, the issue is they'd love to work closer to home. That just eliminates the commuting nightmares for them. The struggle is, can they afford to do it? And frankly, for some of them, are the options out west or south any better from a pricing perspective? But that's just a little picture for us.
Let's see, I guess this might work. Does that work? No? Now it works? Okay, great. Thanks very much. I think we were asked to talk for about 5 minutes or so. Keep in mind, I'm a politician, and this is my favorite subject, so that's going to be a little bit of a struggle for me. So I'll talk fast. I'm originally from New York, so that comes naturally, too. If you don't catch anything, hopefully we'll have time for question and answer. I do want to thank the Alliance for Housing Solutions for doing this, particularly on this the particular specific topic that we're treating today. People who know me know I'm not a morning person, so you can gauge my enthusiasm by the fact that somebody asked me to do something for breakfast, and I said yes. I don't do that too often. But this really is a vital, important issue, not simply because the housing issue is, as my former colleague Al Eisenberg used to say, Arlington's most intractable problem, but because this session today is focusing on an aspect of it that I think needs much more attention and has not been, we haven't paid close enough attention to. And so I also want to thank Lisa Sturdivant for her work, which I think is some of the best that's been done on this and really draws some of the attention to this aspect of affordable housing. And so let me say a little bit about what I mean by that. As a elected official who deals with affordable housing is one of the major things, along with a set of other issues that in fact are related. People often ask, so why does affordable housing matter? It's a freaking question. Why should the county be spending money on this? Why should the government be spending money on this? And I think there are three major areas of argument, three cases that can be made and are made. But we tend to focus more on the first than on the second and third. So the first is what you might call, the moral argument, the values, the social equity argument. It's the right thing to do because Arlington should be for everyone, and we hold those values as a community very strongly. And related to that is the idea that a lot of us really want to live in a community that's diverse. We see it as a value to us to live in a place that isn't homogeneous, but in fact allows our children to go to school with kids who have very different kinds of backgrounds, and that's good for them. And we focus a lot on that, and that alone in Arlington would pretty much carry the day because those values are so strongly held in this community, and it's part of the reason why we have 6,000 units of committed affordable housing, about 14 or 15% of the rental stock that's mostly over the last 20, 25 years been developed. Arlington not having had a legacy of public housing. So, those are really important, and because they work in this community, I think we tend to focus on that, and then we're done. But there are really other important arguments as well. The second area is what you might call the environmental case. And it relates to some of what you were saying in the presentation before. The fact that when people who we need to run our economy can't get housing nearby, they travel from a long distance. And that has all kinds of consequences, particularly for our transportation system, which is overburdened, which has all kinds of environmental consequences. We have a lot more people burning fossil fuels and polluting the air in order to get their jobs here because they can't live here. And that really is a significant factor that I don't think enough attention has been paid to generally, but which these numbers and these real-life examples, I think, tends to highlight. And the third area is the economic case. And this is the one that I think we've paid the least attention to. Now, as you heard, I am, by original background, an economist, so this might be my bias. But frankly, to run a strong economy requires a diverse workforce. We actually create the demand for lots of different kinds of jobs. And somehow we have to have those people. We're either going to import them from a long way away, or we're going to have to find a place for them to live. And the other side of that is that if we're not successful in that, ultimately we can impair the economic performance of our local economic system, and that is what you were hearing again in some of the specific examples. If you're trying to run an operation that depends on people, again with a variety of different wage levels, and many of them have to go past places that would probably give them the same basic job and not require them to spend all that time traveling, at some point you're going to find a hard time. You're going to have a hard time retaining your workforce. And I've heard that from employers, going back quite a ways. I mean, I remember early when I first ran and talking to somebody who was head of a substantial corporation that's headquartered here, and he said, there's no problem for housing for people like me. He was the CEO. He said, I can find great places to live in Arlington. It's terrific. He says, but I have to, I have a problem with all the people that I need to work for me. And, I can get them to come here and travel a long way, at least for a while. But it's not as reliable because, there's a million more reasons why they might not show up to work on time that they can't necessarily control. And ultimately, they're going to decide it's too much of a hassle. And so I have more turnover than I need. And I really, I'm invested in that person training. I don't want to do that just so they go work for somebody else who happens to be located close to where they live. This is the aspect of affordable housing that I think we need to be paying closer attention to in a growing economy such as ours is, and one that is anticipating continuing to grow. Housing is a problem of prosperity. That's partly why it's the most intractable problem, because most problems are we deal with a lot of tough problems, but as we get richer as a community, as we're more successful, we have more ways to deal with that. Most of those problems tend to get better. The problem of affordable housing is precisely an outgrowth of prosperity. But on the other hand, failing to solve it could wind up impeding the growth of that prosperity, and I think that's what we need to pay more attention to. The issue of the impact on transportation, which is closely related to this sort of second area, is one also that it gets talked about, but the dimension of the problem is, if anything, understated by what you saw this morning. We had the discussion of the size of the region, and in the region versus out of the region, all these people coming from out of the region. Remember, though, what Lisa told us. In the region includes places like Spotsylvania and Charles County. So if we look more closely at what's happening in the region, we have people coming from a long way to these jobs. And for a variety of reasons, spreading jobs is not really a good solution. Telecommuting is limited, and we really need to be concerned about this. But what we need right now, I think, is better analysis. I think the county needs to do more in looking at the dynamic aspects of this, but we particularly need the business community to begin engaging in this because it is going to affect long-term their own ability to be successful here. And we're doing quite well. But we approved a building on Saturday. It's a big office building. That building by itself, based on earlier work done a few years ago, probably directly creates the need for 100 to 200 people who will earn wages that would not allow them, to afford anything near, the average house. In wages that are in the level that we just aren't supplying, that we're losing. People are at 40% of median income or less. And we need to figure out how we address that. And I think we need to better understand those kind of issues, the relationship between these jobs and that are needed in organizations like these and the many others in the 40 million square feet of office space in this county. And that we're going to need more work with the business community to analyze that, and more advocacy, frankly, with the county and the community to deal with it. Thanks. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And I know I want to keep on our time schedule, and I know some of our speakers have to leave. So thank you very much to the three of you. I think the information you provided really complements Lisa's hard data. We have about 5 minutes for questions or comment, and then I'll ask our board member, Mary Margaret Whipple, to close. Father Tuck?
I wanted to ask about Virginia Hospital Center. It seems to me you're headed for a car crash.
This morning just went downhill for me.
You know, are you all thinking about, as a organization, about buying or subsidizing or building housing? Innova's going to eat your lunch, I think, with...
They haven't yet.
But
and I used to work there, so I know it pretty well.
But, I mean, isn't it... It seems to me, as an if I were critical, because, as you say, you can't pay more, and people are passing other institutions that do the same work closer to home.
I guess the answer I'd give you is when we stray away from healthcare, which is our core business, it's not a good move for us. So getting into the housing business isn't something that we particularly... I understand your point, and I guess if I had all the money in the world, had the smarts about real estate, and had land, more importantly, that might be something that might be worthwhile. But we don't have any of those, and frankly, we need to focus on healthcare rather than real estate.
Any other comments from the panelists on that? Eric?
It seems to me that one aspect of the community that's possibly not represented here today are developers, because we keep getting new development projects that are seem to be primarily, when we talk about multifamily, primarily one-bedroom units, maybe one-bedroom den, maybe two-bedroom units. But I don't see a product offering out there that is a real attractive alternative to a single-family home or a townhouse that would be suitable for a growing family, for example, for corporate executive board's younger staff as they age and start to have kids. And so I wonder, how do we encourage the developer community to start to create a product that is an alternative and that would be suitable for families?
Well, I think that's a really good and interesting question. Developers tend to build based on two things. Number one, what they think the market will support, and what's most lucrative, and that usually reflects what was most lucrative yesterday, which they will do to death until it isn't. They are very conservative, cautious, don't actually want to take risks. They don't want to pioneer. The other big factor is, of course, what regulations encourage or allow. From the governmental side, I think on the second point, we could find ways to address that, and that's been of some interest to me. There are different housing types that you might find in another region that you don't happen to find here. People don't develop them because nobody's ever developed them. You don't know if there's a market there because nobody's tried. And so, could we do something to encourage that? Could we find through regulations and incentives ways to, kind of encourage a little bit of pioneering there, prove the market, and then maybe it would take off on its own? I think that's an interesting question. But there's no question that everybody aims for the top of the market. They want to do the high-end upscale unit for the archetypal 30-year-old with rising income, and who has no kids but eventually might, but then it's not their problem, right? So if they make larger units, they get fewer units in a building. Even on a square foot basis, even if you let them have the same number of units, there's still not as high a yield on it as they see it. So I do think we have to find some policy ways to address that question.
Michelle.
Yes, I'd like to direct my question to the business leaders here. Thank you for coming. Many of us who are housing advocates have said for quite a long time that we need to get the business community engaged in the conversation. Given that you don't want to become a real estate mogul, where do you see activities or opportunities where you could really be engaged, because I think this is the crucial missing link. If we all understand housing and economic development go hand in hand, we are missing the voice of the business community, and it's wonderful that you come here today and tell us what the challenges are. Where do you see your opportunities to have impact, so we can engage you in that?
I think a little bit similar to what you heard earlier.
Advocacy is an activity that we as an organization typically don't engage in large part because by definition it pits one group or demographic potentially against another, and that's a difficult position as the business community to be in. That said, I think for us in particular, we have been quite active in terms of looking in our immediate environs around some of the local businesses and the restaurants and other areas that have that are either going to be established or that are already established in Rosslyn, because we are patrons of that and those areas quite actively. Our hope is we certainly encourage our staff to be very involved in the community. We have among the highest number of community hours that are delivered in our staff. Interestingly enough, all of our community service actually goes to the District of Columbia. It actually doesn't stay in Arlington. We haven't found great ways to engage in these areas, and that would probably be the way we would approach advocacy, is really at the employee level, at our staff level, to help them draw roots and connections to the community in which they live.
Could I just jump in for a second here? Because two of the supporters of this event are the Education and Workforce Committee of the Chamber of Commerce, on which I participate, and the Alexandria Arlington Workforce Investment Board. So we are hoping that this will start a dialogue with those groups as well, and that I would respectfully submit that that's probably the better channel to go through some of these. And the Chamber was our first letter of support for this public education campaign. So there are avenues through which employers can participate that are existing. I think we, as advocates, it's incumbent on us to help work with these established business groups to beef this up. Mr. Stanton, did you want to say anything?
Yes, that would be a good lead-in for mine. Is we're looking for if what we can provide is our story, then it's where are the forums to provide our story. We're fortunate we are in Arlington County. The work that they do to find affordable housing obviously supports and helps us as we deal with our workforce issues. So yeah, I guess that would be my answer to you, is we'll look for those opportunities to tell our story, assuming that will be the help that we're looking for.
I have one more question here for now, and then I'm going to allow people who have a 9:30 deadline to leave, because that's just the right thing to do. I'm neurotic that way. Ma'am.
I have a question for Mr. Zimmerman from the county point of view. I am an Italian architect. I work in France, and what they did in some cities like Marseille or Palermo in Italy and others, Milan, apart the transportation and the bike and all this, is to have a real sort of chirurgical attention to the place, the city, and whichever building you have that has one story of, I don't know, one story front that can be built on top of it. And same thing with empty places, that they can be arranged, or having a real loft place, like you are from New York, so there are not like fake $3 million lofts that we have next door, but the real loft for young people or young families, like the gentleman was saying, that families that are not rich of one person, but they have kids and they want to live together, and you provide great schools here. So I think have more an attention, maybe it's a question of development, I don't know what you can do, but more close to the neighbor, to that building, instead of, you know, and get some points on the county and then give it to the developer that they can see the benefit of it.
Well, I think you really touched on several different issues there. One has to do with, building type and availability, and I'd say that, having real lofts depends on having real legacy buildings. Usually in places that were run down, that used to be industrial and have warehouses, and they're not, no longer useful for that, and people have found creative things to do with them, which is wonderful. We don't happen to be one of those places. I mean, we weren't an old industrial place, and so that's why somebody has to create, as you said, I don't want to use any of those derogatory terms, Mr. Abdo's building, which I think is quite a lovely building, and obviously very attractive because people are paying a lot to be there. But that's something we don't have. The other aspect of it, though, was the question of the sort of strategically locating and making efficient use of space, and that is the big challenge for America, because we have spent most of the last 200 years, but especially the last 50 or 60 years, treating land as if it was a free good. Just a resource we didn't have to. Of all the resources we throw away, land is one we've really thrown away. And we've done that particularly by subsidizing it so that the economics of it are driven by the idea that it is very cheap. Your land is farther out. It's cheap because it's farther to get to. It's not in a useful place. But the government will build you a highway and let people drive on it for free. And that subsidizes the value of your land. And that's what generates sprawl as much as anything. And then, of course, we zone things difficultly. Now, so the trick is how to get more compact development. And that's actually what we've been trying to do in Arlington, and that's partly why, probably the main reason we've been so successful, is that for a generation now we've been, creating this more compact space. The third aspect of this that you referred to Europe. One thing they do in places like France and most European countries, but I specifically know France from having been there a couple times in the last year and talking to people about housing issues, is they include it. I mean, they're doing a new development, and at least 30%, I believe, by national policy has to be, in effect, what they call social housing, affordable housing. And some places go higher than that. So the great areas, that 30–40% of housing has to be for people at, as we would say, below the median income. And that, of course, is radically different than anything we do in this country. In Arlington, we've sort of been trying to work our way into that with some of our new ordinance that we approved in 2005, 2006 for site plan development in areas like the metro sector. Really small compared to what they do over there, but what we could get through the Virginia General Assembly. And more dramatically, I'd say, with what we did this last summer in Columbia Pike, providing for new development and requiring the inclusion of affordable housing. But it's a long way from, frankly, the European approach, which ultimately is the only way to really get mixed income communities, I think, and to really deal with the problem.
I'm going to recognize my colleague Cecilia Cassidy from the Rosslyn BID and thank her again for this, but Cecilia has a comment on this question.
I just wanted to address Eric's question. We do have a developer representative from the Rosslyn BID in the audience. Andrew McGeorge is with Monday Properties. Monday owns about a third of the properties in Rosslyn. And next to Andrew is our urban design director, Lucia DeCordre. And in the top row, taking furious notes, is Tom Horns, who is with our urban design committee. We work very closely with the planning process and with the county staff on developing projects here in Rosslyn. And one of the reasons that we wanted to support this was, to begin to educate our staff and board members about this need. We also advocate for the Planning Commission, the Economic Development represented by Eric Page over here, Eric, so that there are not these silos of conversations going on separately from each other. Economic Development Commission and Planning Commission should all be speaking to each other so that these issues mesh. And that's why I'm very happy for the BID to have supported this program today. And just to introduce you to some of our players.
I do also recognize Delegate Alfonso Lopez, who has joined us. He's relatively new in Richmond, but he's been very active on affordable housing issues and really has done a great job at reaching out to advocates and asking for our opinion and how he can get involved. So we're really, really thrilled you're here. And thanks for all your great work. So here's the dirty little secret, folks. You're going to be loaded onto our database. Now, we're a small staff, so you're not going to get lots of stuff from us, but you will get stuff. So we will be sending out information to help you learn how you can be informed in the dialogue. And if any time you don't want it, you can just, of course, unsubscribe. But you'll be hearing more from us, and hopefully that'll be a way also to plug into these issues and plug in with these various organizations. I'd like to thank you all for coming today. I think this went really well. Especially thank our guests, and I have to throw out a big shout out to Mr. Stanton and Ms. Ganguli, because I called them at the last minute, and they really stepped up in a big way, and I'm so appreciative. And of course, our board member, Chris Zimmerman, because he's been doing a lot of great work, and we've been working with him, especially on the Columbia Pike project, which is a big plan. You'll be hearing more from AHS and I'm sure other advocates about that. So thank you very much. Have a great day.